Sarah Chen had been a flight attendant for 12 years, but she had never worked a route like Flight 313. The assignment came through suddenly on a Wednesday morning in March, replacing her usual domestic routes with something called Special International Service. Her supervisor, Margaret Walsh, had been oddly vague about the details. "It's a long-haul flight," Margaret explained, handing Sarah a thick folder of documentation. "Very exclusive clientele. The passengers pay premium prices for complete privacy and uninterrupted service. You'll be the only attendant on board." Sarah flipped through the passenger manifest. The flight showed 47 passengers, but their names were listed only as seat numbers, 1A, 1B, 2A, and so on. No actual names, no frequent flyer numbers, no special meal requests or accessibility needs. Just seat assignments. "Where are we flying to?" Sarah asked. "The destination is listed as International Terminal 7, Margaret replied. "It's a new hub for connecting flights. Very modern facility." Sarah had never heard of International Terminal 7, but she assumed it was some kind of corporate airfield or private facility. She'd worked charter flights before for wealthy clients who preferred to avoid commercial airports. Flight 313 was scheduled to depart at 11:47 p.m. from Gate 23B, a gate Sarah had never used before. When she arrived at the airport that evening, she had trouble finding the gate. It was located in a section of the terminal that seemed older than the rest, with dim lighting and outdated signage. The aircraft was a Boeing 747, but it looked different from the planes Sarah usually worked on. The exterior was painted in a color scheme she didn't recognize. Deep blue with silver accents and no visible airline logo. The registration number was partially obscured by what appeared to be intentional scratching. Captain Morrison, the pilot, was a man in his 60s with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been flying for 40 years, he told Sarah, mostly international routes. His co-pilot was a younger man named Stevens, who seemed nervous and kept checking his watch. "First time on 313?" Captain Morrison asked Sarah as they completed the pre-flight checklist. "Yes. What's special about this route?" Morrison exchanged a glance with Stevens. "You'll see. Just follow the service protocols exactly as they're written. Don't deviate from the procedures, no matter what happens." Sarah found the service manual in the galley. It was different from the standard manual she was used to. Thicker, with pages that felt older and more worn. Some sections were highlighted in red ink with handwritten notes in the margins. The first highlighted section read, "Passengers may sleep for extended periods. Do not wake them unless they specifically request service. Some passengers may appear to sleep for the entire flight. This is normal." Another section warned, "If passengers make unusual requests, refer to Appendix C for approved responses. Do not attempt to fulfill requests that are not specifically covered in the manual." Sarah flipped to Appendix C and found pages of strange scenarios and scripted responses. One entry read, "If a passenger asks what year it is, respond, 'Time moves differently during flight. Please enjoy your journey.'" The boarding process was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. The passengers began arriving at 11:30 p.m., but they didn't board through the normal gate. Instead, they came through a service entrance that Sarah hadn't noticed before, walking directly onto the tarmac and up a set of stairs to the aircraft. The passengers were oddly silent as they boarded. They moved slowly, as if walking through water, and their faces were expressionless. They took their assigned seats without speaking and immediately closed their eyes. Within minutes of takeoff, all 47 passengers appeared to be asleep. Sarah had never seen anything like it. Usually, passengers were chatty and restless during boarding, especially on international flights. They asked questions about the flight time, the meal service, the entertainment system. These passengers seemed almost sedated. The flight began routinely. Captain Morrison announced that they were cruising at 35,000 feet, with an estimated flight time of 7 hours and 33 minutes. Sarah prepared the beverage service, even though all the passengers were asleep. About 2 hours into the flight, Sarah noticed something strange. According to her watch, it was 1:47 a.m., but the cabin windows showed bright daylight outside. She assumed they were flying over a different time zone, but the intensity of the light seemed wrong for dawn or dusk. She checked the flight information display in the galley. It showed their current position as 35,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean, but the coordinates seemed to be changing in a pattern that didn't make sense. The numbers would increase for a while, then suddenly reset to the same starting position. Sarah tried to look out the cabin windows to get a better sense of their location, but the view was disorienting. The landscape below looked like it was moving in slow motion, with clouds that seemed to repeat in identical patterns. She could see the same mountain range passing beneath them multiple times, as if they were flying in a circle. At 3:15 a.m., one of the passengers opened his eyes and pressed the call button. Sarah hurried to his seat, 12A, according to the manifest. "Could I have some water?" the passenger asked. His voice was soft and seemed to come from very far away. Sarah poured a cup of water from the galley and brought it to him. As she handed him the cup, she noticed that his skin was cold to the touch. Not just cool, but genuinely cold, like he had been outside in winter weather. "Thank you," the passenger said. He drank the water slowly, then closed his eyes again. Within seconds, he appeared to be sleeping as deeply as before. Sarah returned to the galley and checked the service manual. Under the section about passenger interactions, she found a note. Some passengers may feel cold during flight. This is normal. Do not offer blankets unless specifically requested. She looked around the cabin at the sleeping passengers. Now that she was paying attention, she could see that many of them looked pale and seemed to be breathing very slowly. Some of them appeared to be barely breathing at all. At 4:30 a.m., Sarah tried to contact the ground crew to ask about their estimated arrival time. The radio crackled with static, but she could hear voices in the background. Other flight attendants, making routine announcements. Pilots communicating with control towers. But when she tried to transmit, no one responded. She went to the cockpit to speak with Captain Morrison. The door was open and she could see both pilots at their stations, but they seemed to be in a trance-like state. Morrison was staring straight ahead at the instrument panel, while Stevens was looking out the side window with a blank expression. "Captain Morrison?" Sarah said softly. He turned to look at her, but his eyes seemed unfocused. "Is everything all right, Miss Chen? I was wondering about our arrival time. My watch shows we've been flying for over 5 hours, but the flight information display seems to be malfunctioning." Morrison looked at his instruments. "We're right on schedule. Everything is proceeding normally. But the coordinates keep resetting, and the view outside looks like we're flying in circles." "That's just how this route works," Morrison said. "Trust the instruments. We'll arrive when we arrive." Sarah returned to the cabin, feeling increasingly uneasy. She checked her watch again. 4:47 a.m. According to the original flight plan, they should be landing in less than 2 hours. But something was wrong with the passage of time itself. She began to notice other anomalies. The cabin lighting seemed to be getting dimmer even though she hadn't adjusted the controls. The air felt thicker, as if the cabin pressure was changing. And the passengers were becoming even more still, some of them appearing almost motionless. At 5:15 a.m., Sarah tried to wake up the passenger in seat 8C to ask if she needed anything. The woman didn't respond to gentle shaking, so Sarah tried speaking directly to her. Ma'am, are you all right?" The woman's eyes opened slowly, but they seemed to look through Sarah rather than at her. "Are we there yet?" she asked. "Not yet. We should be landing in a couple of hours." "How long have we been flying?" Sarah checked her watch. "About 6 hours. The woman's expression became confused. "It feels like much longer than that." "Time can feel different during long flights," Sarah said, remembering the scripted response from Appendix C. "What year is it?" the woman asked. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. This was one of the scenarios covered in the manual. "Time moves differently during flight. Please enjoy your journey." The woman nodded and closed her eyes again. Within moments, she appeared to be sleeping deeply. Sarah returned to the galley and opened the service manual to Appendix C. She read through the scenarios more carefully this time, looking for clues about what kind of flight this really was. One entry caught her attention. If a passenger asks about family members or loved ones, respond. They are waiting for you at your destination. Please remain calm and comfortable. Another entry. If a passenger expresses concern about missed connections or appointments, respond. All arrangements have been made. There is no need to worry about schedules. The manual seemed to be designed for passengers who were confused about time, who might be worried about people waiting for them, who might not understand where they were going or why. At 6:30 a.m., Sarah realized that the sun outside the windows hadn't moved. The light was still bright and steady, but it wasn't changing position as it should during a normal flight. They seemed to be flying through a perpetual noon, with the sun frozen directly overhead. She checked the flight information display again. The coordinates were still resetting in the same pattern, and the estimated arrival time was listed as pending. The fuel gauge showed full capacity, even though they had been flying for over 7 hours. Sarah tried to contact the ground crew again, but the radio produced only static. She attempted to use her cell phone, but it showed no signal. According to the phone's GPS, they were located at coordinates 0.0000.00000, the middle of nowhere. At 7 a.m., more passengers began to wake up. They moved slowly and seemed disoriented, asking questions about the flight time and destination. Sarah responded with the scripted answers from the manual, but she was beginning to understand that something was fundamentally wrong with Flight 313. One passenger, a middle-aged man in seat 15F, asked to speak with her privately. Sarah moved to the empty seat beside him. "I'm confused about something," he said quietly. "I don't remember boarding this flight. I don't remember going to the airport. The last thing I remember clearly is being in a hospital bed." Sarah felt her heart racing. "Do you remember why you were in the hospital?" "I was sick. Very sick." "The doctors said," he trailed off, looking around the cabin. "Where are we going?" "To International Terminal 7, Sarah replied, though the words felt hollow. "Is that where my family is waiting?" Sarah consulted the manual. "They are waiting for you at your destination. Please remain calm and comfortable." The man nodded, but his expression remained troubled. "I had a daughter, Jennifer. She was going to visit me on Sunday. Did I miss her visit?" "All arrangements have been made. There is no need to worry about schedules." The man closed his eyes and leaned back in his seat. "It's peaceful here," he said. "I haven't felt this peaceful in a long time." Sarah returned to the galley, her hands shaking. She was beginning to understand what Flight 313 really was, and the realization filled her with dread. The passengers weren't traveling to a destination. They were traveling away from life itself. She flipped through the service manual again, looking for any information about the flight attendant's role. In the back of the manual, she found a section titled Special Considerations for Crew Members. The first entry made her blood run cold. Flight attendants on Route 313 serve as transition guides for passengers who are making their final journey. The attendant's role is to provide comfort and reassurance during the passage from one state of existence to another. The next entry was even more disturbing. Flight attendants are selected for Route 313 based on their compassionate nature and their ability to remain calm under unusual circumstances. Most attendants serve only one assignment on Route 313. Sarah felt dizzy. She sat down heavily in the jump seat and tried to process what she was reading. The passengers on Flight 313 were dying, or perhaps already dead. And she was their guide to whatever came next. She looked around the cabin at the sleeping passengers. Now she could see them clearly for what they were. People who had left their lives behind, traveling to a destination that existed beyond the physical world. Their pale skin, their slow breathing, their confusion about time and place. It all made sense now. But what did it mean for her? Was she dead too? Was this some kind of purgatory or afterlife? She felt alive, but then again the passengers seemed to feel alive as well. Sarah tried to remember how she had gotten the assignment for Flight 313. Margaret Walsh had given her the folder on Wednesday morning, but now that she thought about it, the conversation seemed dreamlike and unreal. She couldn't remember the details of Margaret's office or what she had been doing before the meeting. She tried to recall her life outside of work. She had an apartment in Brooklyn, a cat named Whiskers, a sister who lived in California. But when she tried to picture these things clearly, the images seemed to fade like morning mist. At 8:30 a.m., Captain Morrison's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent into International Terminal 7. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Flight attendants, prepare for landing." Sarah looked out the windows. Below them was a vast landscape of white clouds that seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions. There was no airport, no runway, no terminal building, just endless white space that seemed to pulse with a gentle, welcoming light. She strapped herself into the jump seat and went through the standard landing procedures. But nothing about this felt standard. The aircraft was descending, but it seemed to be moving through the white clouds rather than toward solid ground. As they descended, the passengers began to wake up, naturally. They looked around the cabin with expressions of wonder and peace. The confusion and distress they had shown earlier was gone, replaced by a sense of calm acceptance. The man from seat 15F smiled at Sarah. "I can see her," he said. "I can see Jennifer. She's waiting for me." Other passengers began to murmur similar things. They could see people waiting for them, family members, friends, loved ones who had passed away before them. The cabin filled with a sense of joyful anticipation. Sarah felt the aircraft touch down, but there was no bump or jolt. The landing was impossibly smooth, like settling into a soft bed. The engines spooled down and the cabin lights dimmed to a warm golden glow. Captain Morrison's voice came over the intercom one final time. "Welcome to International Terminal 7. Please remain seated until the aircraft comes to a complete stop. Thank you for flying with us, and we hope you have a pleasant stay at your destination." The passengers began to unbuckle their seatbelts and gather their belongings. But Sarah noticed that none of them had any luggage. They were taking only themselves to their final destination. One by one, the passengers moved toward the exit. They thanked Sarah as they passed, their faces radiant with happiness and peace. The man from seat 15F paused beside her. "Thank you for taking care of us," he said. "You made the journey easier." "You're welcome," Sarah replied, though she still didn't fully understand her role in what had happened. As the last passenger left the aircraft, Sarah found herself alone in the cabin. She could hear voices outside, joyful reunions, laughter, conversations filled with love and warmth. The passengers were being welcomed by the people they had been hoping to see. Sarah walked to the exit and looked out. The landscape was still white and cloud-like, but now she could see figures moving through the mist, the passengers being embraced by their loved ones, walking hand in hand toward a destination that remained hidden in the gentle, welcoming light. Captain Morrison appeared beside her. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said. "This is why we do this work." "How long have you been flying Route 313? Sarah asked. "Time doesn't work the same way here," he replied. "I've been making this flight for what feels like forever, but also like no time at all. Every journey is different, but they all end the same way, with people finding peace. What happens to us now?" Morrison smiled. "We go back and wait for the next group of passengers. There are always more people who need safe passage to their final destination." Sarah looked back at the empty aircraft. "Will I remember this?" "You'll remember what you need to remember. The details might fade, but the feeling will stay with you. The knowledge that you helped people when they needed it most." As they spoke, the white landscape began to change. The clouds swirled and shifted, and Sarah felt the sensation of movement, as if they were lifting off again. The aircraft was resetting itself, preparing for the next group of passengers who would need Flight 313's services. Sarah found herself back in the galley with the service manual open to the first page. The passenger manifest showed 47 new names, or rather 47 new seat assignments. A new group of souls waiting for safe passage to their eternal rest. She looked at her watch. It showed 11:47 p.m., the same time Flight 313 had departed on what felt like hours ago, but might have been minutes or years. Time moved differently on Flight 313. Just as the manual had said. Captain Morrison's voice came over the intercom. "Flight attendants, prepare for boarding. We have passengers arriving shortly." Sarah straightened her uniform and checked her appearance in the galley mirror. She looked exactly the same as she had when the flight began. No older, no different, ready to serve another group of travelers on their final journey. The boarding process began again. A new group of passengers walked slowly up the stairs, their faces showing the same confusion and weariness as the previous group. They took their seats quietly and closed their eyes, preparing for the journey that would take them from one existence to another. Sarah went through the same procedures, followed the same protocols, provided the same comfort and guidance. She was beginning to understand that this was her purpose now, to serve as a guide for souls in transition, to help them find peace during their passage from life to whatever came next. Flight 313 never truly landed, and it never truly departed. It existed in the space between worlds, carrying passengers from one state of being to another, and Sarah Chen, the last attendant, would continue to serve those passengers for as long as they needed her guidance. Because some flights don't have destinations in the conventional sense, some flights are journeys of the soul, and they require special crew members who understand that their job is not just about service. It's about compassion, comfort, and helping people find their way home. The aircraft lifted off again, carrying its new passengers into the endless sky between worlds, where time moved differently, and every journey ended with the same beautiful destination: peace, reunion, and the end of all earthly suffering. And Sarah Chen, flight attendant on the route that never truly ended, continued to serve with the knowledge that she was part of something larger than herself, a system of compassion that ensured no soul had to make the final journey alone.